everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Dory, I'm a teacher of English, and today we're going to talk about the top 15 Ielts speaking tips. I know that we have already talked about the top 15 reading, writing and listening Ielts tips, the videos of which you can find in these links over here. But now let's talk about the top 15 Ielts speaking tips, and without further ado, let's get started. Tip number 1, pronunciation. This is extremely important. Pronunciation is very important, but mind you, I don't mean your accent. They do not expect you to talk like a native speaker. No, not at all. All they want you to see is that you're able to pronounce the words correctly and that you're understood clearly and easily. For example, you should pronounce the word English as English and not as English. Anyway, you get the idea. If you don't know how words are pronounced correctly, don't use them. Now, all online dictionaries have audio pronunciation in every word, so make sure to check that out for words you're not sure enough how they are pronounced. Tip number 2, everyday topics discussion. So in part 1 especially, you're going to be asked to talk about various everyday topics. That is, you must be able to talk about your family, your studies, your preferences, your interests, your hobbies, your studies, your work, things like that. These are very, very easy questions. These are warm-up questions, so they give you the opportunity to show off your English a little bit. So try to give simple answers, to the point and without any hesitation or pauses in between. This is the ideal thing to do. Don't worry if the examiner interrupts you in any part of the speaking exam, because they have to follow certain time guidelines, so they will have to interrupt you in order to be on time. Tip number 3, avoid yes or no answers. In both part 1 and part 3 that you're going to be asked some questions to answer, please avoid yes or no answers or very simple answers with one sentence or so. Try at least to give an answer that is 2 sentences long, for example. So try to expand your answers a little bit. For example, if they ask you, do you like music? Yes, I do. Don't do that. Try to talk about it a little bit more. What kind of music you like, why you like it so much, what you do while you listen to this music, and things like that. Try to face these parts like an interview. So, for example, pretend that you're a famous person and they ask you some questions about your interests and about your beliefs. So, just like you don't like interviews of famous people, they don't talk enough, or the reporter does all the job, in the same way, the examiner doesn't like candidates who don't talk enough, because they make his job harder. And you don't want that. How will your English be evaluated if you don't talk enough, especially in part 1, which is the easiest? So think about it a little bit and be more eager to talk about things. Tip number 4, stay on topic. Well, there are some students who understand the previous tip of expanding your answers the wrong way. For example, in the question that we had as an example previously, do you like music? They would answer something like, yes, I do. The other day I bought a music playing device and my mom got really angry because it was too expensive. No, don't answer like that. Okay, I know this is a far-fetched example, but you know, some candidates out of anxiety try to talk as much as they can, and they have forgotten the original question, so they start talking about anything. So try to be relaxed, focused, and stay on topic in relation to your answer. Tip number 5, vocabulary and linking phrases. These two are extremely important and they are so easy to be improved. Even students with a good command of the language tend to forget most of the words they know, and they start using only good or bad in order to describe one thing. Don't do that. Try to use a range of vocabulary and a range of linking phrases that they're going to help you with your organization of speech and thinking. So, for example, instead of good, you have so many other options. You can say that something is appropriate, something is effective, helpful, useful, interesting, amazing, exciting, depending on the context, of course. And similarly, instead of using but all the time, you can say negative or ineffective, inappropriate, useless, boring, not so interesting. You can use negatives as well. So depending on the context again. So you have so many equivalents to choose from. You can do this with verbs as well. For example, instead of saying I like all the time, you can say I enjoy, I have fun with, I prefer, etc. Also, try to learn some standard linking phrases to help you when you get stuck and you don't know what else to say or how to link ideas together. So these linking phrases will really help you to avoid pauses and irrelevant things. So for a video that can help you with that and the linking phrases you can use is this one over here. Tip number 6. Part 2 and notes. In part 2 you will be asked to talk in a monologue kind of answer, and before doing that they're going to give you some pen and paper to take down some notes while you think about your answer, how you're going to answer the topic. So make sure that you take down notes and that you cover all the points in your answer that you're asked for. Many students complain that they do not have enough time to take down notes about everything and think about it. Well, the majority of times that this happens is because these students don't take down notes. They try to write whole sentences. So obviously you don't have enough time for that. This is not a writing. So train yourself taking down notes in a short amount of time and then trying to expand these notes in speaking form only. Tip number 7, always give reasons and examples for your answer. In part 3, you're going to be given more demanding questions than in part 1 and part 2. So even if the examiner doesn't ask you, always put a why in the end of each question that you're going to be given. This will help you to have in your mind that apart from your belief or your idea about something, you have to state why you believe so, why this is your idea, and it will be very good to also give an example in order to justify your point if you can. If you can't, that's fine, just make sure that you always answer why it is that way in your opinion. Again, you can find useful phrases to organize your speech in this link over here. Tip number 8, speak as you write. I know that this might seem a little bit weird, but really this is going to help you very much, especially when you get the hang of it. In part 3, the questions you're going to get could be writing topics as well, as you can understand. So it will really help you to be fluent and organized with your ideas and your thoughts if your speaking answer follows the coherence of a writing paragraph. What I mean by that is that you should start introducing your answer with an opening sentence, followed or starting with a linking phrase maybe, then state your opinion and say why and use an example after that to justify your point. In the end, you can complete your answer with a closing sentence. This will be a complete answer without awkwardness of how to finish your answer without pauses, and it will be quite fluent once you practice enough doing that. For more information on how you can achieve that, please check this video over here. Tip number 9. Get into the examiner's shoes. Imagine for a moment that you are the examiner of your own language. What would you want to see? Would you like to see a person that is too terrified to speak to you? No, because this will make your job even harder. What you want to see is a happy and friendly person. So you have to know that examiners are tired as well, even more tired than you're going to be. And they are on your side and not your enemy. You just have to make your job, you just have to make their job easy. How are you going to do that? If you go there and have a friendly conversation with them with confidence. If you manage to make them forget that they examine you, which is the ideal, then you will score even higher. How are you going to achieve that? By being prepared. The more prepared you are, the less nervous you're going to be. Tip number 10, communication. There are no wrong or right answers. The examiners are not going to evaluate your knowledge. They don't care, they couldn't care less for what you know or not or don't know. What they want to see, what they evaluate, is your English. If you're able to communicate effectively in English, if you understand what you are asked, and if you answer appropriately without hesitation and by explaining, by giving reasons of your beliefs. Similarly, you can lie too. Examiners know nothing about you and they don't care. All they care about is your English. So if it seems easier at some point to lie in an answer, by all means do so. You can lie as much as you like as long as your English is good and you answer the question on topic. Tip number 11. Don't be a parrot. Many students, when they are asked a question, they repeat it. For example, if they are asked, would you rather live in a city or in the country? They would answer something like that. Would I rather live in the city or in the country? Yes, and then they answer the question, okay? Or they may do, I would rather live in the city because, and they move on answering the question. Okay, obviously the first option is the worst, but the second option is not very good either if you do it in every single answer you're going to give. Try to paraphrase your answer a little bit, not a lot, just minor changes can make a difference. For example, instead of saying, I would rather live in the city because, you can say, well, I prefer living in the city because, just one word, you can change one word, but it will show the variety of your vocabulary. Tip number 12, practice makes perfect. Well, obviously, as everything in life, practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the more you're going to improve. Obviously, so try to answer lots of times, lots of questions in part 1, part 2 and part 3. Do it numerous times and gradually you will get the hang of it, you will be better, you will not make a lot of pauses and you will not hesitate to answer. So the more times you do that, the better you're going to be. Please do not memorize questions by heart. Experienced examiners can totally understand that and it will count against your score. Tip number 13, focus on what you know and not on what you don't know. Gradually, the questions, especially in part 3, are going to be a little bit more challenging. If you don't understand a question, you can ask, could you repeat the question, please? That's fine, that's totally fine. Most times, apart from a difficult word or a phrase, the rest of the question is pretty simple, so don't get too overwhelmed. For example, even if they ask you, what's your opinion on nuclear energy, and you know nothing about it, you still know that nuclear energy is something dangerous, right? So base your answer on that. Also, you can use your weaknesses to your advantage. If you don't know something very well, state it, use it. For example, you can say, well, I'm not really familiar with that topic, but I assume, I guess, I would say that. You can use lots of these things. They do not expect you to be a scientist just to talk in English. Also, similarly, if while you speak, you can't remember a word and you get stuck, again, state it as you would in your mother language. You can say, for example, I can't remember these words, how is this called? It's on the tip of my tongue. It is this thing that we use when we do something like that and that and that. This will show that you can act just like a native speaker. I mean, I'm sure that sometimes you can't remember words in your mother language as well, and you try to think about them. So, act as a natural. Tip number 14, think in English. I know that this is extremely difficult, but not so much if you practice. If you try, the worst mistake you can do is to try to translate your thoughts from your mother tongue to English. Avoid that at all costs. The syntax you have in your mother language, your vocabulary, is more advanced than your English. So if you try to translate that into English at the same time while you have to speak, it's going to be extremely difficult. It will be better to be simple but think in English than do a lot of complex phrasing in your mind and not answer the question at all. So what you can do for practice is to think in English from the time you wake up till you go to bed in your mind. Try simple phrasing at first, and gradually you will be able to do it with more complex phrasing. It takes some time, It takes some effort on your part, but it's totally worth it. Tip number 15, speak up. You will be nervous, that's only natural, but that doesn't mean that you have to be shy or that you have to be so nervous that you can't really talk or make it even difficult for the examiner to hear you. Your English may be excellent, but what difference does it make if only dolphins can hear you? So if you can't speak clearly or loud enough, you will make the examiner's job harder, and this is something that you do not want. So open your mouth, talk clearly, and try to speak up with confidence. So these were my top 15 IELTS speaking tips. I hope they helped you, and now I would like to share with you a personal story of mine. So when I was taking the Cambridge proficiency test, in the speaking exam, I got an A. But you know what? It wasn't because of my range of vocabulary. I was only 16 at the time, so my vocabulary was not as advanced as it is now, obviously after all these years. It wasn't because of my accent either. As most of you know, I'm not a native speaker of English either, so I know exactly what you go through. I've been there in the past, and whatever I tell you to do is something that I have already used on myself, so I really know that it works. So it wasn't about my accent either, because it was even worse than it is now, as I'm not a native speaker. I've got to be honest with you, my grammar was really, really good and I was pretty fluent, but this is not the reason I got an A. I got an A for another reason entirely. Before I go through this, I want to give you some background information here. So at the time, I had a terrible fight with my best friend of 8 years, to the point that we weren't talking to each other anymore. So you know how teens are with the best friends. I was devastated. I thought it was the end of the world for me. So towards the speaking exam, towards the end of the speaking exam, I get this question: how important is friendship for you? Talk about bad timing, right? So I started answering the question, and while I was answering the question, I couldn't help it anymore. I started crying. This was one of the most embarrassing moments of my entire life. Sure, in the future I got more embarrassing moments, but still, this is one of them. Imagine crying in a speaking test. You don't want that. But you know why I got an A? Not because she felt sorry for me, hopefully. Well, she could have given me a C, I would still have passed. The reason she gave me an A that I do now know as a teacher myself is because, although I started crying, really bad crying, really, I didn't stop talking. Through my crying, I explained to her the situation. I told her, well, I'm really sorry, I can't believe this is happening to me right now. And through crying, I still answered the question of how important is friendship for me and why. So, do you see my point here? I'm not saying that you should go to the speaking exam and start crying, not at all. Avoid that by all means. But what I'm saying here is that you should use your weaknesses, your personal weaknesses, to your advantage. Go there to have a conversation without pauses, without fear, and enjoy it. So go there and rock your speaking exam. Best of luck. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it helps. If this is your first time here, I would like to see you subscribe for more videos related to English. If you have any questions or comments, you can ask me here or on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and of course my website. All links are down below. Thank you very much for watching again. Take care. Bye-bye.